that is one of the purposes of today, is to, understand what the scholarship is. But I thought, as a treat for you guys, that, somebody that's had
about the
60
artist's
years.
response to trying
There we
times,
go.
creativity, reinvention, recovery, and of course, flexibility, which is in fact the narrative of our present time.
In 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Hello, Santa Barbara. It's your chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. Hello, Richard. There he is. So,
how are you?
Richard is. I'm hanging in. Richard is our producer, Richard Dugan, and he's been holding down the fort. Literally, he's the only one at the radio station. We used to have a staff there, but we now have Richard, and so yeah, he's been managing throughout the plague to actually hold us together. Anyway, today I am joined by wonderful artists, and I really mean that. First off the top of the bat, the eminent photojournalist Santi Fazali. And Santi's had a long career. He's internationally known. I don't know how many books he's published, etc. And the reason I asked Santi to join us was, today we're talking to student artists, 3 student artists that were awarded foundation scholarships. 22 student artists have been named winners of the 2021 Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara Art Scholarship Competition. And I heard about this through my friend Tim Doherty, and I thought I'd like to have a few of them on the show to talk about the scholarship and their lives in art so far, and contrast that with Santi's, years, 60 plus years in fine art as well. And maybe that the students would be pleased to know that somebody like Santi has actually made quite a name for himself in his craft. And I want to introduce Isaac Babas. Isaac, am I saying your last name right?
Yeah, Babas. Yeah, so
Okay.
you got it.
He's a senior at Dos Pueblos High School, and his photography was awarded the Shaw Family Best of Show Prize. And that means he has quite a nice little scholarship to take with him as he joins college. One of the reasons that Santi's with me, Isaac, is because John and I, my partner is a photographer. You see him with the dog in the back here. When I saw your work, I thought, it's really good. It's really got soul. It's really got heart. It's really compelling. And I shared your photos with Santi, and he agreed to come and remotely meet all 3 of you artists. Maya Sidney is here, who's San Marcos High School. And she actually has a really wonderful story to tell. I read her bio, and it's really interesting cross-cultural story. And her work is also very cross-cultural and influenced by 2 major cultural influences. And I have Claire Wicker with me, Dos Pueblos High School. And Claire's work is really interesting because she starts off by talking about watercolor, which is her medium, and the relationship of watercolor to water. And she is a sailor, and she likens her quest in capturing water and air. And by the way, I have to say light because Santi's here, water, air, and light. And she starts her artist statement off by saying, people think you can't control the wind, and they're right, but it can be harnessed similar to watercolor. And I thought that was really interesting as well. And I kind of want to start out. Oh, and I should also say that I'm really proud to be talking with people that have been awarded the scholarship, because the Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara is, believe it or not, the nation's largest community-based provider of college scholarship, the nation's largest. They've awarded nearly $130 million to 53,000 county students since 1962. They're not for profit, and they provide free financial aid services to scholars. And that is so important right now when, what do you call it? Now we're all zombies. I heard that we're zombies. And so the education system is denigrated to little postcard size heads talking with one another. So, this is a very wonderful, wonderful organization, the Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara. Um, you know, let's start with Maya. And Maya, can you tell me a little bit about your work? And I describe a piece that I'm really interested to know. There's two young women, they're laying in bed and they're kind of talking with their hands. And their relationship is kind of amorphous. And I just wondered, what was that? Is that you? Are you there with your sister? What is that piece?
Hi. Actually, my name is pronounced Maya, like the
Maya,
month,
okay.
but that piece is me on the left side, and it's actually my grandma on the right side. And this was taken like at her house up in the mountains of Taiwan from when I was little. And so I have a lot of memories there. And in the background, I don't know if you can tell, but I did Chinese calligraphy, and that was one of our favorite songs. And I like imitated my mom's handwriting, so that also ties in her influence as well. And yeah, did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, and there's I haven't seen your whole portfolio, of course, but there's sort of a really interesting sense of loss somehow in your work, and I'm wondering, where does that come from?
Well, she actually passed away this summer, so I guess there.
Yes, so she's very close to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she lives in Taiwan? She lived in Taiwan.
Yeah, she did.
Okay. And you visited many times, correct?
Yeah, I used to go there like every single summer for 6 or 7 weeks. So it was a pretty significant part of my childhood.
Right. Well, you say childhood. Your childhood is kind of just closing the door. I'll have to say, but that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And let's move on to Claire. And Claire, this relationship with water, wind, and light. Can you tell me a little bit more? How did you discover that you could capture this in watercolor?
Sorry, you can hear cars and stuff. I think I just discovered it. I loved watercolor. I would just sit down and play with it, and you could puddle the water and do all these different cool effects, let the water take the paint, and run across the page and have a mind of its own without you even touching it. And I think the way you can do transparent layers with watercolor, I think you have wind and water and all of it's kind of, none of it's fully tangible. It's all kind of see-through, and I felt like watercolor was sort of the right medium to capture that kind of transparent feeling of it.
And I understand that you are interested in the environment.
Yeah. I hope to be an environmental scientist. That's why I want to go to college and get my degree in.
And will you study art as well?
Yeah, I think I'm going to minor in art.
Very good. And so the idea, do you foresee that, there's a group in town called the Oak Group, and they are activists in environmental concerns. They use their art in that way. Go ahead.
I think Mr. Gleason's mentioned them before, but I don't know too much about them, but it sounds like an amazing group. I mean, what better way to convey like the beauty and the importance of nature than to show it to people?
Right. And so they've saved, for example, Gaviota Coast and the Carpinteria Bluffs, et cetera. When I saw your work, I thought of the Oak Group because I thought, well, I wonder if Claire is going to use her painting in some sort of activist, for the positive, of course, activist way.
I mean, I definitely hope to. We'll see if my work is that influential, but I definitely want to pursue it as a scientist and as an artist because it is something I care about, and I think you can come at it from multiple perspectives and directions.
It's so interesting because the idea of art, art and science are really so closely related, and a lot of people don't understand that. I don't think in its really early form, the Renaissance. The artist was a scientist because in many ways the artist had to be, let's talk about this, it had to be, if they were a painter, they'd have to understand the chemical analysis of color and the paints and the pigments that they were mixing. They had to understand the relationship between egg and water, and the kind of mixes that they were making to prepare the canvas support or the wood support. So there's a huge relationship between art and technique.
And
Technique.
Michelangelo understood the value of water when he was painting the Sistine Chapel, because if he did it piece by piece, because he knew in order for that color to penetrate, to last for thousands of years, that water was an interesting element into it. He only did when the cement was still fresh. Leonardo didn't do that. He didn't understand that. He painted oil, and this oil didn't penetrate, so he did use it other element. But Leonardo used the water as the element of giving his work eternity.
That's so interesting, Santi, because we talk about Leonardo. I mean, he studied water, and water currents. You would think that he would be aware, but no. Yeah. I wonder, Santi. I asked Maya and Claire a question. Would you honor me and ask Isaac a question in regards to his photography?
Yeah, I saw the picture that John sent me. They're very good, a beautiful 3 portrait he sent. But I am wondering, in a situation like that, if you took more picture where there's people, for instance, asleep, where there's people eat, where there's people intermingle with the other people, what is the activity? Is there a small nucleus of society, of a camaraderie between them? I mean, if that exists, and I hope you took pictures of all those elements.
I think it really depended, because for the most part, I didn't tell them to do anything. I would just take photos as they acted. So
Spontaneous.
Yeah, it was all candid. I didn't want them to pose for me. I didn't want them to stop talking. I would just take photos as they talked and as they ate, if they wanted to do that, or whatever they wanted to do. And it really depends, because I think they don't mingle as much. It's wherever you are in your own camp that's yours. They don't really, it would really depend on if they were cool with the other people that lived nearby, if anyone. So there wasn't that much mingling with others. It really depended.
So I just say, because we're on the radio, I just have to say to the listeners, what happened was Isaac became inspired by the homeless. He was actually biking to Goleta Beach with his camera, and he decided to stop along the path. And there was a gentleman named Stan there, and he had made walls out of brush to keep out of sight. And so Isaac gave him snacks and started to speak to him. And then Isaac decided to do a whole photographic study of homelessness in our area. And he writes that homelessness is a whole different world compared to the one we most commonly see. And what Santi was saying was he was interested in the social interaction, and what Isaac is responding is, surprisingly, there's not a lot of social interaction that goes on in a homeless enclosure, for example. Am I hearing that right, Isaac?
Yeah, there's as I've heard it from some of the people I've talked to, there can be a lot of maliciousness. If you invite somebody in, they could very well just steal something from you as they leave. So it's really one of those things where there isn't social interaction because it's gotten too hard to trust other people, it's a very rough circumstance, but that's how it is.
You know, it's so interesting that Tim chose you three to speak with us today because your work is so different. You know, the idea of Isaac's work being a real social commentary, um, Maya's work actually being a really personal statement of relationships that are important to her, and then Claire's work being a reflection of outdoors. Like I say, almost showing us the beauty of water because she's so interested in the environment. So it's really interesting. The three of you come from really different traditions in art history. You know, one very personal, one very, we call en plein air, Claire, you know, making, you know, spontaneous work as you are outside. And then Isaac's work being really interesting social commentary. And I'm wondering, Maya, what will you do at college? Will you pursue your art?
Yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going to college yet, but I'm planning on majoring in art, possibly painting, depending which school. And I'm also going to study sociology and architecture, possibly as
Oh,
minors.
so, architecture and art together. So now I have to defer to Santi again because I can tell you, one of my favorite books in the whole world is his book on the architecture of Chicago and how he photographed Chicago. That's my hometown. And I wonder if Santi will reflect a little bit about Maya's interest in architecture and fine art.
Well, architecture is extremely important to a human being and to a society because the architect, what he does architect creates an environment. He creates an environment for you. If he's a good architect, he try to make your life very pleasant because you spend a lot of time in your surrounding. And if the surrounding are not ideal, is not congenial, the human being, it does react happy with the environment. So architecture, because of this, is extremely important. Of course, when I did the books on architecture, I did a lot of research about the architects. And I discovered, you said Chicago, because I discovered that in Chicago, for instance, there is the best architectural tradition that has been going since 1860, since Louis Sullivan to Elmer Young, the youngest of the architect of the 70s and the 80s. So it's hundreds of years, almost 200 years of the School of Architecture in Chicago. The first skyscrapers by Mies van der Rohe were built in Chicago. Louis Sullivan, unfortunately, he died penniless, but he built over 100 buildings in Chicago. Adler and Sullivan companies. So when I looked and I researched it, I discovered that really the best American architecture was there. The tradition was there. And when you take pictures of architecture, you try to be faithful to the design of the architect because you want to convey what was in his mind. You know, at times it happened that you wanted to embellish a little bit, maybe with a sunset, or of course, to have a good photography, you have to do it in the best light possible. So, but I'm sure that the architect always consider the environment
The light.
around where they built.
Mm.
They're going to for sure consider the sun extremely well, because I see in my terrace that the sun comes in the window. I mean, in the terrace in the wintertime when it's lower, and when I don't need it in the summertime that is too hot, it stays higher. So the level of coverage that gives to my terrace is by design, is not by chance. So you have to consider all these things when you.
So Maya, so that just is what Santi said. It's a really interesting plan that you have for your future. You know, this relationship between, and you know what, it was so interesting to me is, you know, I am not an artist, but I've studied artists, you know, for many years. That's actually my doctorate, etc. So what's so interesting between May is saying the two disciplines, fine art and architecture, the really interesting relationship is that you yourself, May, are through those two disciplines really honing this one ability. And what is that ability? It's the ability to see. A lot of people do not see. They just don't see. Anyway, Richard's giving us
they just look.
they
First thing I
look, they
teach
don't
is how to
see.
see. First thing I teach is how to see.
That's exactly. So looking and seeing, two different things. Richard, our producer, is telling us we have to go to quick break. Stay with me, Maya, Claire, Isaac, and of course the great Santi Vizali, talking about three young students who have been awarded a foundation scholarship to study by virtue of the strength of their art. Just right up my alley. Richard, let's go to quick break. Hang with me, guys.
You're clear and you are way late. We have 4 total breaks and we still have 3 to go, and you're halfway through the show.
Nice artwork in the back, Richard. You switched some of your foam out?
Say what now?
You got the checkered. It used to be all black in the background. You did some work in the studio for the sound, right? The sponge? The green and black sponge behind you?
Yes. I actually did. And as a matter of fact, and what's fascinating is that I got a lot of flack over it because the boss, who he was not opposed to my upgrading the background, the foam, he just didn't care much for the scheme that I created. And, you know, it's like, well, I wanted to surprise him and all that kind of stuff. And there you go.
Oh, so you can flip it around with your green screen? Or
Well, I've color keyed the blue so that I can put those in. Now, if I wear a blue shirt, then I'm wearing a rock shirt as well.
that's awesome.
It's part of the virtual stuff. Stand by one moment.
I'd give you a raise for that.
Background is extremely important in photography.
Yeah.
I always select my background first.
See that,
And then-
Isaac?
And then corner the people right there where I want them.
Just got a phone call. Elizabeth, kudos to you for having Santi on. This guest, whose name is Anne, says he is her favorite guest.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank
He
you.
certainly has some wisdom. That's exactly why I'm honored that he's here today.
And that is true. Okay, so we've got 3 more breaks to take in the next 30 minutes. Stand by in 3, 2, 1. You're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and I have the honor of speaking with 3 scholars who are leaving high school and on the road to college, awarded the Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara, the Santa Barbara Art Scholarship Competition, 3 winners out of about 20 that actually agreed to come on this show. And I have with me Maya Sidney. She's the Catherine Jones Star Endowed Art Scholarship winner. She's a senior at San Marcos High School. And you haven't chosen your college yet, Maya, but you are thinking of studying art, sociology, and architecture. Really interesting. I have Isaac Babas, the Adam Bertolet Art Scholarship Shaw Family Best in Show winner. He's a Dos Pueblos High School senior. He is going to be attending, I believe, Reed College. Is that correct, Isaac?
I haven't actually made a choice yet. I'm still
I see.
undecided.
I see. And Claire Wicker, she's the Deep Space Sparkle. That's an interesting title. Art Scholarship winner. She's Dos Pueblos High School senior. And I think Tim was telling me, are you on the way to Dartmouth?
I got deferred early decision, so I'm still waiting out to see if I get in regular decision.
It's such a tense time. My God, I remember. I remember that. And you will be studying environmental science and art. Fantastic. A question for you, Claire. Since both of you are at Dos Pueblos, Isaac and yourself, do you know each other?
I don't think we've really formally met.
I don't think so either.
I think I've seen you once or twice at other art competitions, but I don't think we've ever actually talked.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had a conversation.
Well, that's interesting. So isn't Dos Pueblos, I know of them for the actual science end of things, not necessarily art. Is that true?
I think their science program gets a lot more credit.
Attention.
Yeah, when the art actually does a lot. Yeah, I never see the art in the yearbook. I always see like science, sports. We're just kind of left out.
Okay, so well, what I have to just say is, when I was you guys' age, I actually couldn't do math. Science was really not something I was good at, math and all those. But I had all the creative arts, and it's interesting because we have in education polarized. So we've got the sciences and we've got the arts, and they're polarized. But throughout human history, that wasn't the case. A well-rounded individual, what they call a Renaissance man or woman, had an education in both, and they intermingled and fed each other. So I have to say, when I saw both were from Dos Pueblos, I was really proud of you guys for rising to the fore with your art from the school. Richard's telling me we have to go to quick break. When we get back from the break, I want Maya to ask Claire a question, and I want Isaac to ask Maya a question. You get what I'm saying? So think of a question, because we've got three separate disciplines, and Santi's going to chime in and kind of react to the questions that you're going to ask, I hope. And so we've got, like we said at the top of the hour, we've got a photographer who is interested in social causes. We have Claire, who's interested in water, light, and air, and the environment. And we have Maya, who's interested in personal relationships and her own emotional content that feeds into the work. So we have three very different types of artists with us today. I would assume all of you are around 18 years old. Yeah?
17.
Yeah, I'm still 17.
What's really embarrassing, Santi, is when people at 17 to 18 are this talented, this young. I get really embarrassed, and I think to myself, what have I done with my life? Anyway, let's go to quick break. We get back from the break. I want you guys to ask each other questions. Richard, are you there?
Yes, I am. I am here.
Okay. All right. Let's go to quick break.
You got it.
Richard, I like the Stones better than the blue. Blue.
All right. Well, you're clear, by the way.
Cold color.
Hey, Santi, does background matter in radio?
No, however, Elizabeth is having me record these videos.
Oh,
Ergo,
so then it does.
I can kind of
All
play
right.
around with it. I could put anything back there that I wanted to. What I really
see,
want to
I'm
do
look-
is put a couple of hooks up high. We do have some green screen material, and I think I'm going to drop that down so that I can put up pictures from Ireland or wherever other pictures I've taken. Maybe our chicken coop and chicken run in the background. Just
Yeah, yeah.
it just depends upon my mood.
So it's the green screen from the movie thing upstairs where you guys did all the video stuff?
Yeah, well, we
Okay.
actually had one down here that was hanging in here. You remember the curtain?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, well, I usurped that. I would love to move that entire railing to the opposite side behind me so that I could put that back up. All right, we are doing well here now. We're going to take another one at 45 and then another one at a 52.
Okay.
I like the lighting that Santi has. It actually sort of on one side gives him a little bit of a halo. I wonder if that's
Yeah.
symbolic there, Santi.
That's my design.
That's
Yeah,
by
it's the wet
design.
design.
No, actually, I have a very little window here where I am in my studio, which used to be a broom closet. You know.
Hey, there are
paint
people
closet.
who do audio books and they record literally in their closet because the clothing acts as a beautiful soundproofing.
And this is what it was. I made my office big enough, but I have.
All right,
a
we're coming
little-
back, kids. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and I'm speaking with 3 wonderful 17/18-year-old young awardees from the 2021 Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara Arts Scholarship Competition, and each will receive a college scholarship for the 2021-22 academic year. And in previous years, there's been a celebration where the artists can meet and mingle. And of course, with the pandemic, that isn't possible. So before the break, I asked if each of them would ask a question of each other, because it's so interesting that Tim, who's at the foundation, pulled you 3 together for me because your work is so very, very different. And Maya, I wonder, would you ask Claire a question?
Yeah, sure. I remember seeing your work, Claire, last year at the Channel Keeper show before COVID. And I was wondering if you've been experimenting with any new styles or anything since then, or if you've kind of taken your art in refining the same direction, or any changes you've made.
I mostly stayed the same direction. Sometimes I do work with graphite as well because I like how sharp and detailed you can go and get with the pencils versus watercolor, whereas sometimes it's a lot harder to get super fine details. So mostly I just work with those 2. My art's pretty similar to what you saw. It stays pretty tight and detailed, and I think that's just kind of the style I've decided that I like.
And it looks so lovely, so there's nothing wrong with that.
Thank you.
Isaac, ask Claire a question.
Oh, okay. Well, I was sort of wondering, I remember I've seen some of your things on boats. Is there anything else you've experimented with painting or, focusing on?
Yeah, I've experimented with landscaping, landscapes. And I enjoy that, but I really like water. So I think and I'm a sailor, so I love boats, and there's a lot of science and physics that go into boats and kind of the gentle curves, and the sails themselves are just beautiful, the way the light filters through them. And so I think that was sort of the landscape that really stuck with me was, and then I just wanted to paint more, was water in the ocean and boats.
Okay, so I wonder if Maya could ask Isaac a question about his photography.
Yeah, I was wondering when you started and if your like previous projects were also related to, oops, I accidentally muted myself. If they're also related to like homelessness, or if you've worked with other like ideas as well in the past or presently.
I started doing this in I think early October, so it's pretty recent. And this is the first time I've done something like this. I normally worked with mainly just like self-portraits and other random photos I could take, but it was mainly either photojournalism or self-portraits. But this is the first time I've done like interview work like this.
Oh, that's awesome. I think it's cool to have a theme across multiple portraits like that.
Thank you.
And then Santi, I wonder, could you reflect for Isaac upon this really interesting turn that he's taken in his artistic career, which is he's he's actually getting into the, I want to say, psyche, and then trying to capture that in the work by actually interviewing and getting to know the sitter. How important is it that you actually get to know the sitter, Santi?
Very, 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 because um, first of all, the face and the eyes, as we say in Italian, the eyes are the mirror of your soul. So when I take a portrait of somebody, my main focus is the eyes of the person, because all his or her thoughts came out to the eyes. The facial expression also is a very important. Imagine that Leonardo studied the mouth. You know the smile of Mona Lisa has lasted now for 500 years. He studied that our mouth has 24 muscles that move our mouth. It is amazing the expression that you can convey through your mouth, to your face, through your eyes. So indispensable that the focus has to be there when you want to project the personality of somebody. And that's why before I photograph a person, there are two ways of doing it. One is the spontaneous way. Sometimes I want to do the spontaneous way. I don't want to know anything about the subject. I want to go and see what is going to happen, a surprise. But if it's something that I really care about or that is very important for me, I study it a lot. I study the subject. I see what other photographers have done it. So, the Empire State Building, for instance, I mean, millions of people have to photograph. If somebody pays me to go over there to do it, I have to come up with something that is a little different than the other million pictures that have been taken before. Can be the angle, can be the light. And same with a person. You study, you look at what, always I ask people when I photograph them if they have any hobbies. Because when they talk about their hobbies, they relax, and or their pets. If I talk to you, Elizabeth, about your dog, I am sure that you will be the most relaxed person in the world. So you have to be a little bit of a psychologist when you photograph too, not just the f-stop of the shutter speed. Those are techniques that you can really learn. Anybody can learn. There are two things in photography that are very difficult. One is composition, because of the composition is a projection of your knowledge. Only you have in your brain that all your experience of your life. Same with a painting, Claire. All your knowledge goes into that canvas. All your knowledge go into that film, in photography, in the chip or the digital, the cards. That composition is extremely important. All your experience, all you lived past, that you put in that composition. And the more knowledge you have about whatever you photograph, I am sure the better the composition will come. Of course, you have to watch your light. And if you look at my first picture that I took about 70 years ago, is still valid today. So that when something becomes a classic, in other words, there are pictures that you took a while back that today really don't make sense, don't relate. They have no message. They don't last through the years. But the ones they do, you call them classic because they're still actual today.
So that is so interesting. So I wonder when we get back from this next break, I wonder if the three young artists will speak about one image that they've created that has the potential to be classic and why. So let's talk about that when we get it. Hey, Richard.
Yeah, before we go away, so they can know there are three elements to a good picture or maybe a good painting. Light, because without light, we don't have a picture. That's how an image gets done, by light. The chips absorb the light. The film was tarnished by light, the silver. So light, the most important element of a photograph. Composition, the second, because it has to be pleased to an eye. It cannot wander around, has to have a focus and the message that will last forever.
So those three elements. So that's what we're looking for, Maya, Claire, and Isaac, when we get back from the break. Hey, Richard.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's go to quick break.
All right, we're in break. You're clear.
What do you think, you guys? Claire, what do you think?
Well, I think it's just, I'm really enjoying listening to Mr. Vasali speak. I think he has a lot of interesting things to say, a lot of wisdom to share.
And what he's talking about, the three elements, that's cross between any visual, and any visual work of art. I mean, that's sculpture, that's painting, that's photography, etc. That's even performance art. The three elements that he's talking about. So yeah, so you have to think for me now when we get back, a work and when you're actually, we're on the radio, people aren't seeing our video, so just what you want to do is just quickly describe the work that you think has the potential to be classic, and then why it's classic.
By the way, I know Santi well enough to, and I love the man dearly because he's dealing in a subject I love. But I can say this with great love to Santi that it's a bunch of hooey. It's the tripod, the make, it's the rearranging of the rocks in a.
Sometimes it looks like that.
There's this.
And it's what you can do in Photoshop.
We finally in a democratic country, and you can say anything you want. I respect your views, and I keep mine.
You respect my lunacy, do you?
Yes, and I keep mine.
No, he's right on. I took a black and white course in college, and I didn't do as well as I would have liked. Of course, back then I was still visually impaired, and I had problems with contrast. And I kept thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm the one taking the pictures. But then it dawned on me, well, what if you're taking pictures for somebody else? then you've got to learn how to work on the contrast. So it's just fantastic stuff. Okay, Elizabeth, we do have one more break to go to, and we're coming back to you right now in 3, 2, 1. You're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and I'm speaking with three gorgeous and talented artists that have won the 2021 Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara Art Scholarship Competition. And I'm joined by eminent, internationally known photographer Santi Vasali, who agreed to come on because he was impressed with the work of these three young artists and is an artist himself that has been practicing his craft for 60, 70 years. And so the wisdom that he's giving the kids, invaluable. And I asked each of the three to reflect on a piece that they've done that may form the parameters of classic given to us by Mr. Vasali. And those are composition and message and light, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder, Maya, let's start with you. What work have you done that you consider might have the potential to be classic, and why?
I think one of my most recent paintings, actually one that I entered into the contest that you described earlier with me and my grandma, has the potential to be classic, especially after what Santi mentioned, because in this one, I definitely emphasized light, and it's coming in through the right side of the painting and it's reflecting off the faces, whereas half of it is in shadow. So that was a major component of that exploration. And also composition. This one, the hands are in motion, and it kind of reminds me of I'm forgetting the name, but I think in the Sistine Chapel where the hands are touching, the fingers are touching.
Yeah.
That famous motif. But and then what was the third part of the classic work? But the message. Yeah. I wanted these lyrics in the background to fade sort of the way our memories will fade over time, but I still wanted to capture this one moment. And a painting, especially an oil painting, is sort of timeless in its own way.
Very good. Claire, how about you?
I think the piece that for me that I think could be classic was one of the pieces I entered. It was titled Argo, and that's the name of the boat I painted. It was when I took a picture of it to paint later, I was out sailing and the wind had died. So we're nearing sunset, the water was glassy and they still had their spinnaker up, which is the big kind of balloon-like sail in the front. And it just kind of started to collapse and you could just see the afternoon light filtering through, and you could kind of see the shadow versus where kind of there's highlights, and it really how you can see all the little crinkles in it. And I thought that was beautiful. And the water was just glass. And it was just a perfect reflection almost of the boat in the water. And that was my favorite piece. I think there's a lot of interesting moments with light. And I also, the concept, it feels very calm and serene and sort of has a feeling of solitude to it.
Fantastic. So Richard, are you there, Richard?
Yes, I am.
So you say we have to go to one more break, and then
I say that you have one more break very quickly, and then we'll come back with a couple of minutes left.
Okay, let's do that and come back and we'll ask Isaac what work of his is classic.
And you are clear.
Elizabeth.
Sir.
You appreciated that I'm reading for I don't know how many times, the Divine Comedy again in Italian. I just finished the Inferno last night at about 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't put the book down. Isn't that an amazing piece of writing?
By the way, I have this goes out to John. I envy him, his experience with you, in that he is just I can only imagine what kind of a degree he would have after working with you for as long as he has and traveling and so
Couldn't
forth.
pay
I
for
think
it.
that's just so very cool.
So what Richard's referring to the three of you young folks is the importance of mentorship. And I would urge you, this is just me. I'm a mom, and I remember when my son was going off, he actually attended Duke in the South. So when he was going off to school, I said, make sure that in your teachers and your professors, you find a few that you can actually really relate to. And, I spoke to my son about this concept of mentorship. And my son said, well, we don't do that anymore. That's an old thing that you guys used to do. Well, when he finished his degree, he said, I thought about that, Mom. And I actually, even though I disagreed with you, I actually know how valuable that advice was. So when you guys set off on your career, what Richard is saying, is that to have a mentor it may not be a fashionable thing, right, Richard? But
Yeah.
it's
And I'll tell you what,
so,
I'm sure Santi feels this way too. There's a great responsibility that one takes on when one becomes a mentor, because you want to give that person the vastness of your knowledge and experience so that they can pick it up from where you left off, in a manner of speaking. Speaking of which, we're going to speak now, and you have 2.5 in 3, 2, 1. You're live.
welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and I'm speaking with three young artists named winners of the 2021 Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara Art Scholarship Competition. And we charged the three of them to speak about works in their oeuvre that they have considered or what might consider classic. And we've just got 2 minutes, but Isaac, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. What work is classic of your oeuvre?
This is one I haven't submitted yet or to anything. I just recently took it, but it's a close-up of this man's hands, and he's holding a can of iced tea, and there's like light glinting off the can, and it's filtering through his fingers, and you can see all the details of it and the wrinkles and like dirt under his nails, and it's paired with a quote, which is him talking about how he's judged for being homeless, and he's like, he's even afraid to go into town sometimes just because he'll be judged by people. And he doesn't even like inherently look homeless. I get like that sounds bad, but like he doesn't. So why are people just assuming that he is?
Huh. Santi, what do you think about that?
Well, unfortunately, it's always a first impression, You look at people and you tend to pass a very fast judgment. Now, people like me, I don't want to brag, but I have photographed hundreds of thousands of people in my life. So I have the knowledge of being able to judge a little better in a short time that other people have to explore in order to judge. So I am one of the lucky ones, but unfortunately is always this very first impression. You're dirty or you're clean. You dress well or you don't dress well. You drive a Mercedes or you drive a rundown car.
Santi, I'm sorry you got cut off by the automation. We needed to wrap up there. Anyway, there's the program. And thank you so much. I have another live show coming up. I'll be sending you the audio and video shortly, Elizabeth.
Okay, then I'll send it to you, all of you guys.